State Antony Blinken, who's giving a live address. Let's listen in.
As a host country for NATO response force on the eastern flank, Poland plays a critical role in this reaction, and we are determined to abide by it. In line with the Charter of the United Nations, Poland will provide all possible support to Ukraine, who is currently defending itself from an unlawful, as I said, unprovoked aggression. Thank you.
Secretary Blinken.
Thank you. Zbigniew, I want to thank you, as always, for a very good exchange, for the very warm welcome. And we were just at NATO together. We were in Washington together just a few weeks ago, and it's very good to be here with you. I'm also especially pleased that Ambassador Brzezinski is now here in Poland, credentialed last month. Timing could not be better. It's vital that we have all of our confirmed ambassadors in place at this critical time. And we are, in fact, meeting at one of the most urgent moments in the long history of friendship between our countries. As allies and partners, Poland and the United States have stood together through many, many challenges. Now, the very ideals that bind us, freedom, democracy, peace, security, are under threat in this region as never before, certainly not since the Second World War. The people of Poland know how important it is to defend freedom. So do Americans. And we will stand together, as we've been standing together, in support of Ukraine and against Russia's unprovoked, unwarranted, premeditated invasion. In NATO, at the European Union, the OSCE, where Zbigniew is the chair in office this year, Poland is doing vital work to respond to this crisis. It's hosted an increased NATO presence. It's supported the robust EU sanctions against Russia. And it has done a great deal to facilitate security assistance to Ukraine. As NATO allies, defense cooperation between Poland and the United States, I think it's safe to say, is closer than it's ever been. Since January 30th, the United States has more than doubled the number of our military personnel deployed in Poland to now more than 10,000, including a brigade of the 82nd Airborne Division. And we've significantly increased the amount and types of military equipment and capabilities that we positioned in Poland. As President Biden has said, we will defend every inch of NATO territory. Poland is also a leading responder to the humanitarian crisis that Russia's invasion of Ukraine has sparked. As Zbigniew just said, as of today, more than 700,000 people have been forced to flee the violence perpetrated by Russia by crossing the border from Ukraine to Poland, with more coming every single day. I'm going to have the opportunity to speak to some of the folks who've come over just recently from Ukraine, but I have to say it's an incredibly powerful reflection of Poland's values, that vulnerable people know that here they will find refuge. To help support the needs of Ukrainians in Poland and other countries, the Biden administration just requested of Congress $2.75 billion in humanitarian assistance. That's both to meet the need of vulnerable people and communities inside Ukraine, as well as to support refugee services, including here in Poland. That's in addition to the more than $54 million in humanitarian assistance to Ukraine that we announced just last week. We also sent a disaster assistance response team to Poland, working very closely with humanitarian agencies to provide the critical health care, safe drinking water, sanitation, hygiene supplies, protection for vulnerable people, especially women and children. We've delivered nearly 20,000 thermal blankets suited for cold climates. We've provided funding for emergency supplies to sustain health care for up to 100,000 people for 3 months, and up to 500 emergency surgical procedures. Embassy Kyiv has temporarily relocated to Poland as well, and I'm grateful for that, that Poland is hosting them. They and our embassies and consulates in Poland and across the region are working hard to assist American citizens and their families departing Ukraine, and to help them with the influx of U.S. military personnel, humanitarian workers, as well as assistance. We established a U.S. Welcome Center close to the Ukrainian border. It's been operating 24/7 since hostility began. We have support teams as well stationed near the border in Romania, Hungary, Slovakia, Moldova, to assist any Americans who are leaving Ukraine. At this moment of crisis for millions of Ukrainians, and as the security of Europe hangs in the balance, Poland has stepped forward with generosity, with leadership, with resolve. We're grateful for the strong foundation of friendship and cooperation that we built together over many, many decades, which so many are now relying on today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Time for some pictures, please.
That, of course, was U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken giving an address in Warsaw, and he clearly parroted the same line that was given by NATO yesterday. Blinken said that the main goal right now in this Ukraine conflict is to defend every inch of NATO territory, and he reiterated what NATO said earlier about protecting its members within the alliance. He also expressed appreciation for Poland for taking in refugees and admired Poland for stepping in, and I quote, with generosity and leadership, especially in what is now appearing to be a large-scale humanitarian crisis. Now, to talk more about the conflict and its fallout, Russian affairs expert Fred Ware is joining us live from Moscow. Fred, thanks so much for joining us yet again on WION World is One.
Thanks.
My first question to you from the recent update coming in, Ukrainian authorities have expressed mistrust with Russia when it comes to accepting all the norms of the ceasefire. It in fact says that it is speeding up evacuation because it worries that this humanitarian corridor may be used to its advantage by Russian troops. What do you make of that?
Well, I don't know. I think that they agreed in the talks to have these corridors. They are the best way to get the citizens, the civilians, out of Mariupol. I think that's the main area where they're doing it today. And you see, the Russian expectation is that this population is sort of well disposed to Russia. You know, the staunch Ukrainian patriotism is more concentrated in the West and has been less so in the East historically. That may be changing under the impact of these horrible events. I don't think anybody living in Ukraine can feel like welcoming their country being invaded. But the political divisions have been there for a long time, and I suppose the Russians will regard this population as one that it wants to win over time. So I'm doubtful that they would do something terrible to fleeing civilians.
Let's talk about what Moscow is doing. There are concerns that the ban on social media platforms such as Facebook and Twitter is in a sense a way to control the information that is coming out. Moscow, of course, says that its bid to control fake news that is being spread by quite a lot of Western powers. But is it a way to essentially control the narrative of this war, for Russians in particular?
They are trying to do it on a world scale. I think you in WION know, you're hearing both messages. You see the information war and all its associated propaganda unfolding under your noses. So they're doing that. At home, they have passed yesterday a really draconian law about fake news. And fake news is anything that is different from the official narrative. And quite a few independent news outlets have been forced to close. Like the last vestiges of an independent media in Russia are being rolled up. That's terrible. But as for the internet, they are, I know I sit here and try to access my own Facebook page. It's very difficult. They are trying to like suppress platforms like that. The thing is, they can't really do it. What I do when I want to access my Facebook page is I switch on one of the 3 VPNs I have on my computer, and I easily do it. A lot of Russians are using Telegram, which is that messaging app. It has scores and scores of news channels, all different kinds of them, including many based in Ukraine. So Russians who want to get different points of view, different streams of information, with a little bit of savvy, can easily do so.
Right, absolutely. Just my final question for you, Fred, right here. Now, Western intelligence predicts that Russia could increase the pace and strength of its attacks in Ukrainian cities. What's your viewpoint on the same?
I think that, and I get my information from Russian military experts and from the defense ministry, so I try to see every side, read everything I can get. But as I understand the Russian plan, it isn't really to assault these cities like Kharkiv, but to surround them and press on with the pincer movement that they are executing. And they do seem to be accomplishing it more slowly than they may have anticipated, but it is a classical military maneuver which is aimed at isolating, encircling the army, the Ukrainian army in the Donbass. Most of Ukraine's army is concentrated there in the Donbass. And the Russian plan is to squeeze them on two sides, with the separatist and Russian forces moving from the east and the Russian forces who have cut off along the line of the Dnieper River, cut off that army from the west, from north and south. Right. I think they're going to do that. I can't see why they wouldn't do that. And I guess you got to remember that on day 9 of the American invasion of Iraq, they were still 3 days away from Baghdad. This is a big-scale assault, and it does seem to be unfolding horribly. It's a nightmare. I myself haven't slept in days. I'm so nervous, but we just have, if you want to be objective, you have to be cold-eyed and try to assess what's happening. And I think what's happening is that the Russians are bearing down harder and harder.
Right. Fred, thank you so much for all those inputs, and thank you for joining us on WION at this hour.
My pleasure. Thanks.
WION World is One is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.